You ready for this? 1983.
Oh, of course, you've been to Helsinki. I've been to Helsinki, never. Yeah.
No, on the way.
19 when?
From Helsinki to Leningrad to do my semester abroad in Leningrad when I was in college. But we all started in Helsinki, and then we got on the scary Soviet trains. We went across the border. All the Soviet soldiers jump on. They look through all your stuff. It's very dramatic. But Helsinki's a beautiful city. There's a lot of drinking going on in Helsinki.
I'm looking forward to it.
So be careful. No, it's beautiful. Beautiful people.
And by the way, just so our audience knows, Laura Ingraham was a hellraiser in college. She went to Dartmouth with Dinesh D'Souza, and they made a lot of trouble and noise when they were there. I'm just saying.
Not me. Hannity, it was a great show.
Wait a minute. I read about one other. Wait a minute. I read about one other offense. Remember? It was in. I'll forget. Have a great show.
You better watch out. I got a whole hour now to fill with stories about you, so I'd be careful. You better go to the pub now, Hannity.
That's a month. I'm going to the last pub open. Have a great show.
You have a great rest of the morning. Good evening from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle. What an amazing show we have for you tonight. Bombshell testimony on Capitol Hill today from that anti-Trump texting FBI agent Peter Strzok. We're going to have full analysis of the raucous hearing from a top lawmaker, Rudy Giuliani, and a lot more. Also, a bombshell report by the Hill's John Solomon that the FBI may have received, get this, multiple versions of that Russian dossier. Mr. Solomon will be here to explain. And across the pond, President Trump, as Sean alluded to, is in England tonight, and we will have exclusive footage no one's seen of what the British folks really think about this president. Plus, Michelle Malkin joins us to discuss an explosive interview Trump just gave to a UK newspaper. But first, when a Trump-hating FBI investigator struck out. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Barnum and Bailey would have undoubtedly been proud. There may not have been elephants, though, or jugglers, or trapeze artists flying through the air, but for hours and hours and hours today, former FBI investigator Peter Strzok was walking a tightrope that Republicans desperately tried to knock him off of.
You're asking us to believe that when you say things like F Trump and stop Trump and impeach Trump, that those are just personal beliefs, and that when you say those things, you never cross that line.
Sir, I'm asking you to believe, and I'm offering you evidence.
You have under oath been as clear as a bell on that.
How many interviews did you conduct related to the alleged collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign?
The special counsel's equities has instructed me not to answer questions about the ongoing investigation.
I'm asking.
Did you know that he was meeting with representatives from Fusion, including Glenn Simpson?
I cannot discuss the content of the operational matters.
And your testimony is Bob Mueller did not kick you off because of the content of your text.
It is not my understanding that he kicked me off because of any bias. I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate, Agent Strzok.
Well, would he get kicked off for having bad breath? I mean, it's ridiculous. Meanwhile, of course, we saw Democrats stretching out the nets to save Strzok at every turn, using explosive denunciations and every lame parliamentary trick in the book.
Mr. Strzok, you are under subpoena and are required to answer the question. Are you objecting to the question? If so, please state your objection.
Mr. Chairman, I object.
The gentleman does not have standing to object. There is no
point of order.
No point of order here.
The point of order should be heard.
I move to subpoena Steve Bannon in our House Intelligence investigation. The motion has to be heard immediately, Mr. Chairman.
The motion is not germane.
I move to overrule the ruling of the chair.
Motion been made to table.
I need a Pepto-Bismol. That was very, very dramatic. Now, when that tactic got old, though, Democrats just tried to change the subject altogether.
There are 3,000 children separated from their moms and dads, and the government doesn't know where their moms and dads are. That seems like something the Judiciary Committee should be investigating.
What we have not done is investigated the children being stolen away from their families, nor have we looked at our president meeting with Mr. Putin.
Mr. Strzok, you are before this committee for one reason, to serve as a monumental distraction. They need to identify a villain. Mr. Strzok, tag, you're it.
No, you're it. I love these games, hijinks, games, circus. Stay with me here, because there were moments when the hearing went from circus-like to a complete sideshow.
And I've talked to FBI agents around the country. You've embarrassed them. You've embarrassed yourself. And I can't help but wonder, when I see you looking there with a little smirk, how many times did you look so innocent into your wife's eye and lie to her about Lisa?
Mr. Chairman, this is outrageous.
The credibility of a witness
Shame
is always
on you,
an
Mr.
issue.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, I understand that passions are running high, but I have a question here. What did that accomplish exactly? Now, at some point, the obfuscation and the hyperbole on both sides tend to cancel each other out. And most Americans watching the House oversight proceedings for any length of time today probably thought to themselves, is this really what it's come to? At times it seemed they were more like contestants in both parties, and they were competing for the soundbite of the day.
I never prejudged anything. Not in this case, not in any others.
Impeachment
Second,
for what, Agent Strzok?
You mentioned the use of the word impeachment. That was used in the context of my not knowing what this would lead to.
Agent Strzok, are you kidding?
If there are two people that are thrilled and excited today, there are two people. The folks over at Fox News and at the Kremlin.
I have never seen my colleagues so out of control.
If I could give you a Purple Heart, I would. You deserve one.
All the veterans must have felt really good about that little line. That didn't work. But set all that aside for just a moment. And we're still at the same point, basically, we've been at almost for the past year or so. The FBI agent in charge of two of the most important political investigations of the past decade was steeped in animus toward candidate and then President Trump. At a time when he was supposedly impartially examining and overseeing the Clinton email investigation, he was pretty much actively rooting for her election victory. He agonized, and you read it in the text messages, about the possibility that Trump would win, and he assured his then lover that he would not let that happen. But pay no attention to that, because there's no bias there.
There is no act of bias. So this false assertion that you're making that political personal belief must equal bias, that somehow we've merged those two words together in the dictionary, is one of the triumphs of what's been going on recently that I cannot disagree with more. Is that I and the other men and women of the FBI every day take our personal beliefs and set those aside in vigorous pursuit of the truth wherever it lies, whatever it is.
Okay, I have a question. So do the men and women of the FBI who run really high-profile investigations, do they really carry on a running commentary via text message about the subject of their investigations and what they hope happens to the key players therein? I don't think so, and I certainly hope not. But that is precisely what Strzok did. Now, there is no doubt, of course, as was repeated over and over again today, that FBI agents are like everybody else. They are entitled to their own political opinions, and they have them. But the blatant biases revealed in Strzok's text and the specificity therein, how he discussed them with his girlfriend, are troubling, and they remain so. He claims to take great offense, and he was sitting up very straight and looking down his nose at everybody at the thought that anyone should believe from his own writings that he meant to stop Trump's election and create that insurance policy that he referenced to guarantee Trump's defeat. But that is what he wrote. And he wrote it, as he said today, when he thought nobody was looking but his girlfriend. Strzok's continuing denials of bias are as incredible and maddening as today's hearing. And that's the angle. Joining me now for reaction is former Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, with me here in the studio. Richard Goodstein, a former advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton, and GOP Congressman Ron DeSantis, who attended today's hearing. Congressman, I have to say that I was looking forward to this. I know he'd already testified behind closed doors, but I thought at times it wasn't working for the Republicans. I've got to say, I think Peter Strzok did not come across particularly well, like kind of priggish and very, to me, kind of snooty and indignant. I never think that works well for a witness. And I like Louis Gohmert a lot. I thought that moment, that exchange with Gohmert and Strzok, I didn't think that was good. And I wouldn't want to have been one of the Republicans on that committee when that went down.
Well, look, I mean, it was a wild day, but I would say, I mean, reading the text is one thing, but then to have him sit there and say, I said I was going to stop Trump. I didn't mean the FBI. I just meant the American people would not vote. It wasn't credible. Just like his explanations were not credible to the Inspector General, he was not a credible witness. And I think his explanations didn't hold water. And so the idea that he is doing this, and he did act with bias, as the IG said, with the Huma Abedin emails and how he was focusing on Trump-Russia collusion. So I think the public got to see the bias. And here's the thing. We pressed him on this. He would not answer these questions. What was the basis for the collusion case? You won't tell us about Papadopoulos. He barely talked about the dossier. So that's the troubling thing, is that you have the bias, but then you have this investigation, which we still have no there. He even said 10 months after it, there's nothing here. I'm worried that there's nothing here.
And there were a lot of interesting moments. I wasn't saying there weren't interesting moments. There were. It just was for, 10 hours. It seems like you could have gotten to some of these points. But just the way it is with so many people on the committee, so that was difficult. But I want to get to Richard here, because throughout the hearing, Strzok did insist that he had no bias. But the IG report, as Congressman DeSantis referenced, said the following. When one senior FBI official, Peter Strzok, who was helping to lead the Russia investigation at the time, conveys in a text message to another senior FBI official, Lisa Page, that will stop candidate Trump from being elected, it is not only indicative of a biased state of mind, but even more seriously implies a willingness to take official action to impact the presidential candidate's electoral prospects. We concluded, this is the IG again, that we did not have confidence that this decision by Strzok was free from bias. Richard.
So here's what's not plausible to me. The intelligence community says the Russians meddled to help Trump hurt Hillary. The Senate Intelligence Committee, Republicans and Democrats, said the exact same thing. The president, meanwhile, is basically saying, well, I'll ask Putin if he did it, and if he didn't, well, maybe he won't.
Why are you not? I'm just, Richard.
No, here's the answer. Here's about Strzok.
Yeah, why are you over on Putin
Because
today?
Strzok could single-handedly...
This is what the Democrats did today.
Strzok could single-handedly have blown this whole campaign to high heaven by disclosing what he knew. He might even...
Let me tell you why that's a really lame point.
He could have even gone to jail
That was recycled over and over again. You know why that's lame? Because it would have been so overtly obvious. It would have been so obvious and so stupid for him to do that, easily traced back to him, and an ethical violation of DOJ rules.
But the point is, if he was such a fanatic... But the point is, if he was such a fanatic, if all his critics are saying he was so fanatical that he biased this thing so badly, he was so fanatical he would have gone to jail to stop Trump from getting elected.
That's just a lot.
They did.
Why is that so awful?
Because he's not that stupid. That's why. He might have thought he was talking to his girlfriend, but he's not stupid enough to leak the fact that this investigation was going on right before the election. It would have gone right back to him. Would have been obvious. He would have been in real potential.
The public wouldn't have bought the New York Times, though, did publish on October 30th that this investigation is going on, and they said no ties to Trump. He didn't have the goods. That's why he couldn't leak it.
Jason, I also want to get your reaction to this. Mark Meadows was asking Strzok today about Obama's knowledge of the Russian collusion probe.
Were you aware of any discussion that took place with regards to the Russia collusion investigation that took place with the Obama administration's executive branch?
I am certainly aware of conversations that occurred with Obama administration officials.
It took a long time to get him to finally say that. I think we were going to cut the soundbite longer. It was like 3 minutes. It's like pulling teeth to get him to respond to that question. All along, many of us have a hard time believing, Jason, that the White House did not have, at least wasn't regularly updated, as one of those text messages revealed. What was your sense about that aspect of the White House being updated, informed about this Russian collusion investigation and candidate Trump?
Well, it is one of the deep concerns, and there is this triangulation between the DNC, what was going on in the Hillary Clinton campaign, Bruce Orr, the development of this dossier, and then how it was funneled back into the FBI. Was that information then fed inappropriately to the FISA court in order to obtain warrants? I thought Jim Jordan had one of the best sets of questions where he got Peter Strzok to admit under oath that, yes, Bruce Orr was involved. His wife, of course, Nellie, was involved working at Fusion, a company that had less than 20 employees. And that whole triangulation does involve the DNC. It does involve political actors that would have naturally some ties into the White House. And I think it's still an open and valid question.
Jason, you were head of the Oversight Committee. Goodlatte, who we have enormous respect for on this show, done such great work on immigration and so many other issues. At the beginning of that hearing today, the Democrats had clearly planned, and Ron, you probably agree with this, to get this thing off track as fast as possible. Objection, talking over each other. It was like a major swarm. If Jim Sensenbrenner was still, he had that gavel in his hand, I have a feeling that room would have been cleared if that thing kept going. But Goodlatte kind of let it roll on a little while. Did you think that was a smart move? Because the Democrats really dominated for the first 10 minutes of these constant objections.
Yeah, I think one of the takeaways the American public would see is the antics that the Democrats went through. I think it was pre-scripted that they were going to have a recorded vote. You had the clerks in the room. I can tell you, normally when you have a hearing, you never have the clerks there. So the chairman must have known that there was going to be a recorded vote, but it did get out of control. He did try to gavel him down. Wow. And when you have a poor witness with a message that you don't want, that's what you do. You yell, scream, interrupt, and act outside of the rules. And it got away from him a little bit. But that's the way they act, and that's what the Democrats do, and that's what America sees. They can believe that they actually want to give him, Peter Strzok, a Purple Heart. I mean, that's where the Democrats are coming from on this.
I've got to say that was among the more embarrassing comments. There was a few moments that I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. This is like something you would see on Saturday Night Live, where Peter Strzok actually was asked to read his own text. Like nobody would want to be in that position. He had to read his own text. Let's watch.
OMG, he's an idiot. Trump is a disaster. I have no idea how destabilizing his presidency would be.
Ms. Page said, not ever going to become president, right? Right?
No, he's not. We'll stop it. What the F happened to our country, Lise?
Okay, read it again that way.
Sir, did you not? Was it not intelligible?
You
just want to hear it for me to repeat it?
Please.
Okay, sir. Sure. Happy to indulge you.
I mean, Emmy, Tony, Academy Award. Richard, I think the point the Republicans try to emphasize is that this wasn't just a run-of-the-mill FBI agent. This was the guy who was the lead investigator in two of the critical investigations, really, of the last, I think, 25 years in politics, right. 20 years in politics, maybe since Iran-Contra. And to hear him reading those, and Blanken disaster, et cetera, it dramatized it in a way that I think when you just read the transcript, you don't really get. I liked that moment. Sorry, it was a little dramatic, but I liked it.
Can I just say that you had a list of Republican House and Senate members, Republicans in the cabinet, who said equally damning things during the campaign and since Donald Trump was elected. I won't repeat them here because they're frankly a little off color. By Republicans,
right,
including somebody who's on the air with us right now.
So you're repeating what the Democrats did.
No, but I'm just saying, you're saying Strzok is horrible and he's off base.
Talking more loudly doesn't
make a lot of people were saying that, not just
Richard, I will say, talking more loudly doesn't make your point any more cogent.
Okay, well,
I love you, but that is just a lame tactic. Here's what I will say. The people like Ben Sasse who criticize Donald Trump, first of all, number one, Ben Sasse has literally no constituency. Number two, he's not the lead investigator in two of the critical investigations of the FBI of the last 20 years. So to say, well, Ben Sasse doesn't like Donald Trump, so are we going to bring Ben Sasse up? That's a ridiculous point.
But what's perverse, excuse me, Ron.
Got a first-year law student would know that.
What's perverse is that Strzok sat on the dope about Trump and the Russians, and he helped put out about Hillary's emails. So it's a twisted way to look at it that somehow he helped.
Have dope about Trump
I don't think any of us at this table would want to be investigated for something that we were accused of by someone who had an innate animus toward us and be satisfied saying, oh, no, it didn't affect my outcome. We'd all be like, what? Why are you leading this investigation?
Strzok was one of millions of people who probably had those views. He's the only person in America who opened up a counterintelligence investigation.
Well, he also can sign off on a FISA warrant.
Exactly.
There was a moment where Peter Strzok seemed to contradict whether or not he was under a particular type of investigation. Let's watch.
So you think it's okay for the target, and you are a target, of an investigation to determine what should be delivered rather than, if you will, the government, right?
Sir, I'm not aware of any investigation of which I'm a target.
Are you under review by the FBI Office of Professional Responsibility?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, OPR is another wing of the Justice Department, so he is under investigation. I mean, are we
nitpicking
here? I mean, that's the problem. Is like Republicans sometimes can get in the position where they are perceived to be nitpicking on issues that are not the primary issues.
Well, he's also under investigation by the Inspector General for the Trump-Russia collusion, because that IG report is just about the Hillary, and it did spill over into some of his text messages. They're actively looking at his role in that, and when I asked him questions, he tried to say he wasn't a subject to that. He is a subject.
Jason, before we let you all go, what are the grounds for an FBI general counsel to shut down questioning and answering questions from congressional oversight committee hearings like this? He kept relying on that. Is that valid?
It is absolutely not valid. And I can tell you, as the former chairman of the Oversight Committee, there is no attorney-client privilege between a government employee and a government attorney. There is none. And the other part is, no, they have no privileges, and then you can have concurrent investigations.
All right, Jason, thank you. Great panel, guys, for everything. And up next, Giuliani on all of this. Don't go away.
At Bear, our roots run deep.
That last segment was a lot of fun. So let's get right back to our top story, the testimony of the anti-Trump texting FBI agent Peter Strzok on Capitol Hill today. I think it just wrapped up 5 minutes ago. That thing never ended. To discuss, we're joined by the president's top lawyer in the Mueller probe, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Rudy, this was like a marathon today, and there was a lot of silliness in this hearing. The Democrats were pulling out all these parliamentary tricks, and they were talking about kids in cages. I mean, they were back to the immigration. I don't know what that had anything to do with what was going on, but Strzok started off his testimony today with a prepared statement, and it was almost as if he was projecting himself to be this great savior of the representative democracy that we have. Let's watch.
In the summer of 2016, we had an urgent need to protect the integrity of an American presidential election from a hostile foreign power determined to weaken and divide the United States of America. This investigation is not politically motivated. It is not a witch hunt. It is not a hoax.
Superman.
Well, I mean, with the text saying that he had to stop Trump, he had a whole secret plan to stop him, the names he called Trump. He should never have been involved in the investigation. We shouldn't have to worry whether he was biased or not. If I were running that investigation, I never would have let a partisan like that, nor would I have hired Jim Quarles or Weissman or the other people that Mueller has hired, who have donated money to Hillary, cried because she lost, been found to be some of the most unethical prosecutors in the history of the Justice Department, particularly Weissman. You go hire an unethical prosecutor to investigate the President of the United States? Well, you're going to get an unethical investigation.
But today he kept saying, when he was pressed about these text messages, at one point they made him read his own text messages, which
he doesn't remember.
But he said, well, yes, I wrote those words, but that was late night texting, and you have to know the whole context. It's like the words were there, he wrote them, but he doesn't want to own them.
But I think he said he didn't remember the Stop Trump one.
Yeah.
But then he can't remember his intent if he doesn't remember doing it.
Apparently we have a lot of forgetful FBI agents up there.
I will tell you, I spoke to about 5 former FBI agents tonight, including a former high-ranking one, very high-ranking. They're glad because they see him as a complete renegade, a complete scoundrel, and a criminal. He's not an FBI agent, and every organization has some really bad people. This guy is a really bad guy, and the reason the Democrats look so bad is they were stupidly defending him. That whole thing about, well, I'm innocent, like your former Democratic guest here. I'm innocent because I didn't leak illegally.
That's what Zoe Lofgren was saying. She said, look, none of it came out. They could have leaked this information. Lofgren and so many others said
they also could have shot Trump. I mean, it is not a defense to this crime that you didn't commit another one. It's not a defense to bank robbery that he didn't hold up the candy store. I mean, I could have held up the candy store. And look, I wasn't the one that held up the bank. I mean, that's a ridiculous defense.
By the way,
pathetic for an FBI agent. The guy's also arrogant, smug.
He reminded me a lot of Jim Comey.
The deplorable. We're all deplorable.
The smell of the Walmart. We don't have the smell of the
guy.
No, the smell of the Walmart. They said, well, you said that when you went down to southern Virginia or rural Virginia, you could smell the Trump supporters. And he said, oh, no, that was just... He didn't want to say it was another.
In other words, all those things that he secretly tweeted or he secretly wrote in his text, he didn't really believe. He was writing it for fun. He wants us to believe that. Meanwhile, he instigates an investigation of the President of the United States, then a candidate, totally baseless. To this day, they can't find a single bit of evidence that ties President Donald Trump to any kind of collusion.
What's the progress on Mueller?
The progress is that the Mueller investigation is falling apart of its own weight.
They're hiring more people. They hired five more people,
Well, they
some
can
more
hire-
cyber guys. And they said
Well,
that's a sign that they're really
they're
getting close.
They can hire 10 more people. With this kind of support, like Mueller fires him but never finds out the extent of his taint. To this day, we don't know the taint that he created in that investigation since he started it. That's the investigation we're dealing with right now, with a bunch of people who had the same political views he has.
They found out that Mueller did not, in fact, that came out today, did not, in fact, ask any questions about his texts when he departed.
So I have an assistant U.S. attorney when I was U.S. attorney. He's writing horrible things about the defendant or the subject of the investigation. And he's with about 10 other people. And I don't find out what he said to them, what he did, who he interviewed.
What does that tell you about Mueller?
What it tells me is Mueller is asleep at the switch. It's being run by the same kind of Hillary partisans that he is, the same kind of horrible person that he is, with this attitude about deplorable Americans like you and me. And they will frame Donald Trump, which is one of the reasons that they're trying to set a perjury trap for him. And thank God we're tough enough to smell that out.
What do you think about the fact that we found out today that Strzok still has the security clearance?
I think it's disgraceful, and I am ashamed of the Justice Department today. Why aren't they moving against this guy? Why does he still have a security clearance?
Well, there's a Democrat said he should get a Purple Heart, he said today.
Is he still getting paid?
I don't know.
I think he's suspended. I think he's still
Yeah,
getting
I guess
paid.
he's still getting paid.
You are paying, and I are paying his salary. And the guy is maybe the most flawed FBI agent since the guys who spied for the Soviet Union.
Any closer to an agreement with Mueller of some kind of limited questioning?
Probably further away.
Further away.
When you see this kind of thing, you're a lawyer. Would you work your client into a kangaroo court with guys who donated $36,000 to his opponent, cried at her loss party, represented the scoundrel who broke the heart?
I never understood the people who thought Trump should ever testify before this Mueller thing. I mean, maybe written questions to certain questions.
If you have an objective group of people that you can persuade, of course you'd consider testifying. But if you have people that are like him, they don't even.
He's gone though. Now they have a whole.
But they don't. They have never unraveled the taint that he created. Nor do we know about the texts of the people that are there right now. I want to see their texts in 2016. What did they write about Donald Trump? Do they think I'm a deplorable and you're a deplorable and the president is, and the 80 million people that voted for him? Now, I want to know that.
You're going to stick around because we have a lot more to get to the next block, because Peter Strzok's testimony comes less than 48 hours after reporter John Solomon drops the news of another FBI scandal. John's going to share the details. You will not believe this. Rudy will react next. That infamous Russia dossier. Now, why does this matter? Well, the revelation comes from none other than FBI agent Peter Strzok, who wrote an email to FBI leaders when BuzzFeed made the dossier public. Remember, in early January 2017, he said, I have the PDF via iPhone comparing now. The set is only identical to what McCain had. It has differences from what was given to us by Korn and Simpson, meaning 3 different versions. Count them. That likely means the FBI obtained all 3 different versions of the dossier from different sources. John McCain, far-left Mother Jones reporter David Korn, and Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS. Republican Congressman Jim Jordan asked Strzok about the email earlier today.
Are there 3 copies of the dossier as evidenced by what you said in this email?
Sir, to be clear, I want to talk about this email. I want nothing more than answer your question,
but you're not talking about it. You're not answering my questions. Are there 3 copies?
3 copies of what?
The McCain copy, the BuzzFeed copy, and the one that you got from Korn and Simpson.
Sir, I can tell you I never had contact with Fusion, with Mr. Simpson, with Mr. Korn.
Here to explain the significance of this development, stay with us. It's very important. John Solomon himself, the opinion contributor at The Hill, and Rudy Giuliani, who's listening to this going, this can't be really happening. John, why does this matter? That there are 3 different versions of this salacious dossier floating around at different times that are clearly attacking Donald Trump?
So in counterintelligence, one of the most important things for agents to avoid is what's called circular reporting. Are we getting the same intelligence from different people, and it's not real? It's just an echo chamber. So they fire Steele. Remember, he had inappropriate contact
in October of
in
2016. He shouldn't have talked to reporters. They had to nix their contact.
That's right. He's out of there.
Really reliable. Thanks.
But somehow Steele's document keeps finding its updates walking into the FBI through these emissaries. And, John McCain, they give it to him. He's a willing participant because he's not a big fan of President Trump after the election.
We need to talk more about the McCain angle here. I mean, he's, God bless him, he's suffering. But that is, no one wants to talk about that.
Well, we
have to talk about that.
We know from the testimony of Glenn Simpson that Glenn Simpson set that delivery up, that Glenn Simpson made sure that John McCain's people got that. That's in the Senate Judiciary testimony. Now you got David Corn, who wrote a story in October, then decides to give the document to the FBI in November after he's already written the story. That doesn't make sense. Nothing wrong in October if you're trying to authenticate it. You've already written about it. Why do you give it to the FBI? And then you got Glenn Simpson, who we heard today might have used Bruce Orr to get the document in. So now that whole chain of custody has been disrupted, and you got people feeding in around and creating circular intelligence.
One investigator told you the following. I love this line. Yeah. The dossier and its related dirt was on a circular flight path aboard a courier service called Air Clinton, and the FBI kept signing for the packages. Yeah. That's chilling. Rudy Giuliani, your reaction?
Isn't that called collusion or conspiracy to gin up a totally inappropriate, totally illegal wire based on national security? And doesn't it, with no investigation, doesn't it taint the entire Russian probe? How much of that information from that wire ended up being in the Russian probe? How much is it presently infecting it? And why doesn't Manafort lawyers move to dismiss the indictment for taint? There'll never be an indictment of the president, so we'll never get a chance to do that. But we will sure want to investigate that in the counter report that we write to whatever kind of hatchet job may be done on the president, which I hope doesn't happen.
I want to share another part of this exchange with Congressman Jordan today. This was one of the best parts of the hearing. Let's watch.
But the FBI did get documents from Bruce Orr.
Yes, sir.
Did they get the dossier from Bruce Orr?
My direction from the FBI is, I may tell you, the FBI received material from Mr. Orr.
Now, this is amazing. This is amazing. So Nellie Orr,
as you are.
Nellie Orr works for Fusion, works for Glenn Simpson, and she's giving documents.
Regular order, please. Let us bring the director of the FBI to answer those questions. The gentleman cannot answer.
Well,
he's asked and answered.
The American people.
He's asked and answered. He cannot.
Sheila Jackson-Lee should have been thrown out of that hearing. We want to hear the answer to that question. You notice how when they're starting to get to the truth, the Democrats will start talking over the witness. But that's not cool. I mean, I like Sheila Jackson-Lee. She's a fun person. I like her. But they can't do that. But this was happening all day long at this hearing. The moment they got close to something, like talking over it. Well, why don't they let them answer the question? John, here, I think people hear dossier. They're like, oh, what does that mean? Yeah. It's important because, as Rudy Giuliani said, without that dossier, the Carter Page surveillance, the kickoff of this investigation began, even though they had not interviewed any witnesses. They got to that point today. He didn't remember or wouldn't say if he interviewed one person to justify the beginning of that Russian probe.
Take a look at something I wrote about a week ago where you see Pete Strzok writing an email saying we now have a pretext, an excuse to look at Carter Page. And then he puts the FISA together. What is the evidence? It's the dossier paid by Hillary Clinton and a story leaked to Michael Isikoff that is based on the dossier. It's circular reporting. The entire beginning of this investigation violates all the norms of intelligence reporting.
Rudy, does this get in the head of the president when he's over there doing this really important
No. I talked to the president this morning. He's perfectly focused on what he's doing now in London. One of the things we're deprived of with President Trump is the argument that this interferes with the president. But it does interfere with the presidency. And that's a disgrace. Mueller should be ashamed of himself. Those Democrats trying to protect that liar Strzok today should be ashamed of themselves. And every FBI agent I know wants to see this guy drummed out of the bureau and they want to see him not paid. Now, the problem with the dossier is, okay, it led to fake news. We got to deal with fake news. But it also led to a wiretap. And it led to a national intelligence wiretap. And it led to evidence that came out of that. And it led to evidence that was in the minds of Strzok and other people when they continued the investigation of Trump into Mueller. So how much of it is infecting the investigation today? We may never know, which is why I think the investigation is totally phony.
When I hear insurance policy, every time I read that,
what does that
just
mean?
That one line over. And today it was like, well, no, these are texts. You're taking. He kind of like blew it all off.
But what does insurance policy mean? It means I have a certain set of things I'm going to do to stop this guy as a last resort. Now, the mere fact that it didn't leak or didn't kill him doesn't mean that it wasn't illegal. It was clearly illegal, and that's why he's lying about it.
Do you believe the president, in his meeting on Monday with Vladimir Putin, will he be able to be as open, effective, as focused with our relationship with Russia, with all this stuff out there floating?
Well,
That's what's always bothered me about this.
There's a lot of differences between him and Vladimir Putin, and the best thing is to try to iron them out. We're probably not going to do that. Here's what the two men know. They never colluded with Donald Trump, right? Whatever the Russians did, they didn't collude with Donald Trump. And the only crime committed is the hacking. Well, nobody thinks that Donald Trump was involved in hacking. He wouldn't know how to do hacking, nor would he do it. So once the information is hacked by the Russians, if that's the case, then everybody else is entitled to play with it. If they give it to you, you can report it on Fox.
John, last word.
I'll say one thing. When the mayor was talking about the colluders, I think there's one other part. My own profession gets used in a way that I think is very concerning in this. You see reporters being part of the circular exchange, air delivering documents as part of this circular reasoning. I think when we all step back, my profession needs to take a look at what we did and how we may have been played in all of this. I think that's another important part of this.
John Solomon.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks for your work. The Hill does a great job.
Very proud to be there. Thank you.
All right, stop complimenting. Just ahead, we have exclusive footage from the streets of London during the president's visit. You won't believe it. President Trump is in England tonight, where, of course, he attended dinner. It's a beautiful setting with British Prime Minister Theresa May at the birthplace of Winston Churchill. There were minor protests today, but major demonstrations are planned tomorrow in London, where Fox News foreign affairs correspondent Benjamin Hall asked residents about the president's visit, which he shared with us exclusively.
The Trump Arms, once just a small local pub in London, now rebranded to commemorate the president's visit, and where staff are pulling pints in his honour. It's also where supporters have started to gather from across the UK to discuss the president.
Despite the media trashing him, he stands strong.
Meanwhile, across town, as people braced for protests, which are expected tomorrow, not everyone was as complimentary. Are you happy that he's coming? Should we be welcoming him?
No, I don't think so.
Others managed a few more words. But are you just criticising his policies there or him personally?
Bit of both. His policies are to stir up as much trouble in as many nations as possible.
And some spoke straight to him. And if you could speak directly to him and he was right here in front of you, what would you say to him?
That he should learn to be kinder to people. That's it. That's basically, just be a nicer person.
But of all the people we spoke to, most welcomed the visit. I wondered if you had a moment to answer one question about President Trump's visit. Sure. And whether you think the country should be welcoming him.
Sure, why not? He's President of the United States, and he should be respected as such. I support him.
So here in central London, it really has been a mixed bag. There are people we spoke to who disagreed with President Trump's policies but respected him as a strong leader. There are others who said they wish the UK had a similar type of leader, especially now at such a precarious time for British politics. Laura?
And the so-called experts in the media have been overwhelmingly harsh in their assessment of President Trump's performance in the just concluded NATO meeting. But let's now talk with someone who actually served in the NATO arena. Retired 4-star Air Force General Philip Breedlove, the 17th Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, joins us now. It is great to have you on, sir. Thanks so much for joining us. I was stunned.
Good evening, Laura.
Good to have you. I was stunned to see the media's reaction, their reaction. Every time they would hear from one of the actual NATO attendees, the prime minister, the president, they would say, well, it was a good meeting. It was frank. It was honest, sometimes brutally so. But we made real progress. And it's very different from the way it's all played out in the media day after day here. Does that surprise you, given your experience in this complex arena of global affairs?
No, Laura, it doesn't. And what we often see is, like yesterday, a lot of the reporting was centered around the bilateral meetings, the extra meetings on the outside of the actual summit. And then, much like what you have described, what I have been able to dig up is that the reporting on what went on in the summit, in the meetings, was much more collegial, much more forward-leaning, and actually some pretty good results. We'll not know what the actual results are until the communiques and the official reporting comes out of NATO, but everything we're hearing now is that while there were some tough verbiage surrounding, the meetings inside came to some good conclusions.
General, what I don't understand about the analysis of all of this is it's almost like people believe our relationship with NATO should never change. I mean, even if the Soviet Union is gone, we still have a problem with Putin, obviously, but the world is a different place. This is 69 years of our relationship with NATO, and I'm glad we have NATO. I think NATO is really important. But the mere fact that Donald Trump said, you got to pay your 2% and you can't wait until 2024 when you're all out of office and Donald Trump won't be in office anymore to say, oh, we'll have it done by then. He said, no, you're going to pay 4%. I mean, that's kind of art of the deal stuff that he did. But, I mean, since when can't we demand that our billions of dollars are well spent and reciprocated, at least in total, by the other member nations?
This is actually a line of logic that has been used by multiple presidents, but none have really had the effect to this point that President Trump has had. Now, some of us, including me, occasionally have been a little concerned with his tactics, techniques, procedures, the verbiage that he's used along the way. But we have to be intellectually honest enough to understand that despite that, he is the one that has gotten the results so far, at least the beginning of those results.
Well, Emmanuel Macron had very favorable things to say. Theresa May it looked like they had a fantastic night tonight in Britain. It looks like the relationship with Angela Merkel is, it's more honest, I think, than it was in the past with other presidents. I think honesty and transparency in this very complicated arena is better than just the niceties. Well, we hope you contribute more money, and then nothing happens. That's what Bush did, and that's what Obama did. They both said contribute more money, and the pace of the contributions increasing somewhat, but not at the level that we need for a really vibrant and strong NATO. So I think Trump's trying to bolster NATO, not trying to help Russia. He's trying to bolster it.
Well, the results have been good, and I would also say that we need to just examine the facts on the ground across the past few years. And this actually, some of it started in the Obama administration, but certainly continued under the current president. And that is, the United States has continued to increase its investment via the ERI, the European Reassurance Initiative, and now the EDI, European Defense Initiative, and we've increased our rotational presence of troops, etc. And then as we see the nations also coming on board during this summit and pledging their own troops and things, this is a good sign for the future.
General, thank you so much.